They were convinced I was going to be the Seinfeld of Japan. I got to film school, I got to Warner Brothers, and I was miserable, frankly. There's no doubt there would have been thousands of people who would have killed for that job in LA, and yet it was the most brutal experience ever.
You returned to Australia, joining Anderson Legal as a partner, and then 9 months later, the Enron scandal led to the collapse of Anderson, leaving you to figure out your next step.
You can't risk-proof your career. I found that out. And I also got to learn the meaning of joint and several liability within a partnership.
It seems like it just has to be this linear path, and that if you take time out of it, you're going to get behind. And I feel like your career path is an example that's actually not the case.
Today's episode is sponsored by VXT, the phone system built for law firms. VXT integrates with practice management systems so that when lawyers make calls, their billable time and legal advice can be saved in the right place automatically. 20% of billable time goes unrecorded. A lot of that is phone calls that get forgotten about. Get some of those billables back using VXT. Go to vxt.co.nz or click the link in the description to find out more.
Welcome to the File Notes podcast. Today we're joined by someone whose career has taken more twists and turns than most. Nick Abrahams started as a lawyer in Sydney before going on secondment to Tokyo. Whilst he was there, he started his own comedy club and even starred in a sitcom. He went to USC Film School in Los Angeles, worked on iconic shows like ER and The West Wing, and then jumped into the dot-com boom as COO of a listed tech company. When the crash hit, Nick returned to the law, and today we are going to be going through his journey, exploring his approach to career development, including insights from his research as adjunct professor at Bond University. So welcome, Nick. To start us off, can you tell me what you were like as a kid and if you always envisioned yourself becoming a lawyer?
What was I like as a kid? No, I had a weird, a personality flaw. So I'd always wanted to be a Hollywood studio executive. So it was an unusual thing because I grew up on the outskirts of Brisbane in Queensland. So there's not really a direct line from Brisbane to Hollywood. But that was my dream.
Bit of foreshadowing there because you eventually got there, but we'll get to that part of the story soon. So once you did decide to go to law school, you ended up at a large law firm in Sydney. What kind of law were you doing when you started out?
So when I started, it was 1990, and so we had a very big recession here in Australia, and so I was an insolvency lawyer for 4 years, and it was great training, actually. That's some of the best training any young lawyer can get, because when companies stop because they go insolvent, then all of the relationships freeze at that point in time, and then you have to go and assess what is the real legal status of things, so trusts, agency, all those sorts of arrangements you have to look at in a great amount of detail. So I did that for 4 years because there was just so much of it going on. And at that stage, there were lots of lawyers losing their jobs. So I think I started, in my first year, and I think there was 65 or so that started that year as graduates, and I think by the end of it there was only 20 of us left. So yeah, you found whatever job you could get.
Yeah. And so what kind of papers or subjects did you enjoy at school that led you to ending up in that area, whether it being that much of a choice at that time, with it being a difficult job market? But what were you into?
At school I loved physics. Physics was my favorite thing, and I continue to have an interest in physics. I think it's a fascinating analysis of the world, and physics looks at the world both at the object level that we see, but also at the subatomic level. So physics was a big area for me, but I had no sense of that was even a job or what someone might do. In fact, the person who was the career guidance counsellor at the school that I went to, she was very keen that everyone should do commerce law, and that really bore out, because I think from my final year of 120 at the school I went to, there were 22 of us did commerce law. So it was preordained by our career advisor.
Nice. And something that I found really interesting when you were telling me about your career previously was that you went on a secondment to Tokyo. Working in Japan must have been quite different. Can you tell me what that was like? Any adjustments you had to make?
Yeah. It's a very different, certainly back then, because that was the mid 90s. And so Japan had just come through this massive bubble economy, so it was sort of on the downswing, but it was still incredibly prosperous. And then law firms there were very different to the law firm that I had practiced in. It's a big city law firm. And so I can remember the partners would wear slippers. So it was very common that most of the lawyers actually used slippers. So there were a whole range. As you walked in to the firm, there was a little sort of piece of cabinetry to the right hand side where you could pop your shoes and you could wear your slippers. So that part of it was unusual. And then I can remember there was a fellow there who was the interpreter, or the translator was his name. And he was, I think, terrified of me. He was an older fellow, and he, in my 3 years there, he barely spoke to me. And after a little while, I realized why, because I would read his translations and I'd be like, I'm not sure he's actually very good at speaking English. So I would have to correct most of them. So it was a wonderful time. I loved my time in Japan. I loved working with Japanese people, and it continues a love of Japan that I have to this day. I spend a lot of time traveling back to Japan.
And what kind of law were you doing there? Were you still doing insolvency or were you in a complete new team?
Yeah, it was everything. It was really, most of it was all transactional work. So lots of financing deals. So Japan had a lot of money, which it would lend to the rest of the world. So lots of financing, and then just general corporate deals.
And was that an opportunity that came up from the law firm you were at? Were there a bunch of you that went, or did you go out and try to find something to get some experience overseas?
Yeah, no, I was lucky. It came from the law firm. So I put my hand up for it, and they arranged for me to go over there. So it was very easy in that sense. I didn't speak Japanese, so it was a bit trickier from that point of view. But yeah, it was, yeah, just as part of the law firm. So it was a relationship that we had with that other law firm.
That's awesome. Do you still see opportunities like that in the legal profession?
I Yeah, sometimes there are some opportunities, and indeed some in relation to Japan still happening within organisations. Yeah, looking back on it, I think what tends to happen now, maybe because I'm in a global firm, I tend to see the secondment opportunities happening internally within our firm. So we're people going we're going offshore to our other offices. But yeah, there's certainly still international secondments available. I think that's still a thing.
And something else unique about your story that most other lawyers won't be able to say that they've done is when you were in Japan, you also started a comedy club and starred in a sitcom. Has comedy always been a large part of your life?
Yeah, no, well, yeah, it's something that I was doing before I went to Japan. So at night I was doing stand up back in Sydney. And then I got to Japan, and it was a bit of a shock because there was nothing there. And what I saw was an opening in the market, which was particularly for the foreign or the gaijin community to have an opportunity to come together and have a bit of a laugh about things, because it can be very stressful. The Japanese people are very kind and so forth, but it's a very foreign environment. So yeah, I saw an opportunity to create a comedy club, which was an English language comedy club. It was the first one in Japan, and started that. And then I created a couple of characters as a result of that, and I was then commissioned by a Japanese TV network to write a sitcom, which was about me. And they were convinced I was going to be the Seinfeld of Japan. And so who am I at 28 years of age to say, no, that's a bad idea? So I went along with it. I thought it was fantastic. So I had a wonderful time. And this was all, I was still working as a lawyer during the day. And so we shot that pilot and they aired it a couple of times, but it didn't take off. But yeah, I had a great time, and I sold that business to some friends of mine when I left Japan 25 years ago, or more now, 28 years ago. And I'm just delighted because it's still actually operating today. So that same club still work. So it's nice. It's a nice thing to have at least been involved in.
Yeah, that's so cool. And do you think that your creativity and humorous side crosses over with your work as a lawyer, or do you think you keep the two quite separate?
No, I think they do. I'm a big believer in, at least for me, to try to see things in an optimistic frame of mind. And it's been very helpful to me over the years. I have an unusual background for a lawyer, and I'm sure for some of my very kind-hearted partners at Norton Rose Fulbright, from time to time, I'm sure they think I'm a slightly odd mix to have. It's just been good for me. I think the law is a great place for people who are just a bit different. Just it's obviously, if you are built a particular way and you fit into a mold, then the law is a great place for that as well. But I think there's great opportunities for people to bring their whole selves to work, I guess we would say these days, and just be the person. And I think the flip for me in terms of the good fortune I've had in the profession has really come about because I'm not trying to be anyone else. I'm not trying to be a button-down three-piece suit person. That's not who I am. So I've found a clientele that sort of seems to enjoy working with me, and I have a particular brand which is just about me, and that is really helpful, I think. And I think that's what I try to do with lawyers that I work with, which is trying to help all lawyers find their unique legal brand. Because I think when you go through law school and then you come out, I think there feels like this tremendous obligation to conform. And I think now more than ever, actually, the more that people can embrace their past, whatever they've done, whatever networks they have, then the opportunities are incredible. So yeah, I'm a big believer in whatever it is. Not everyone needs to be a stand-up comic or anything like that. It's just, how do you take your background and how do you turn that into a unique proposition that means that you will get the job or the new matter ahead of other people?
I love that. And I think you have a great perspective on that, given you have had some time out of the law.
Yeah.
So after you had your sitcom experience in Japan and your secondment there, you got into the prestigious USC Film School in LA. Did you think that this was the end of your time in the legal profession and you were going to make your big Hollywood break? Or what were you thinking at that time?
You know what? I wasn't even really thinking, to be honest. I was just on an adventure. Japan had been a huge adventure. The comedy club had been a great adventure. I had a whale of a time, and the TV show was super fun. And I was like, well, this is a shot. And I was lucky to get into USC. They only take 20 people a year, and George Lucas went to that school, so it's a great school. And I was like, well, let's just have a go. So I literally didn't go into it thinking I hate the law, I will never go back to the law, and here I am. I was literally just having an adventure, and that seemed like the next step that I should take, because I was interested in going and living in the US at that stage, and going to film school seemed like a fun thing to do. And I was very interested in that more creative life and trying to see what that was about. So film school was a good next step.
I love that you have that mindset because I feel like the law, like starting from the way it's taught, then the kind of career path that's shown to everyone, it seems like it just has to be this linear path, and that if you take time out of it, you're going to get behind. And I feel like your career path is an example that's actually not the case.
It's so true. Look, I got very lucky, but I think there is this sense that you jump on this treadmill and it's within 5 years you become senior associate, and then within 10 years or 12 years you become a partner, and then you stay at that. I think that's a harder proposition these days, and I think it's and for some people that might be fantastic. If that's what you love doing and you find an area of law that's fantastic, then I think that's perfect. But equally, I think the law can be very accommodating if you have had other experiences, because the critical part about being a good lawyer is obviously knowing the law. And people got great marks to get into great law schools. They got good marks at those law schools. So let's just assume that people are all pretty smart. So then there are these added disciplines, as I call them, just capabilities that make people able to excel. And you don't need to have just gone through the traditional approach. You can come at it from a number of different ways. And as I said, what's critical is about creating that unique legal brand.
Law is notoriously like a stressful profession. And as I could imagine, being a creative executive would be too. And that's one of the roles you held at Warner Brothers when you left film school. What one do you find more challenging between the law and the creative industry?
Yes. Well, that's a very easy question because I was a creative executive at Warner Brothers in Burbank. So I'd achieved the goal that I had as a kid, and I was working on ER and then working on the development of The West Wing, the TV show. So that was an incredible job. There's no doubt there would have been thousands of people who would have killed for that job in LA. And yet it was the most brutal experience ever. Forget everything that I'd done as a lawyer, either before that or after that. I would have to read 4 or 5 scripts a night after working a full day until 7:30 or 8 o'clock. Then you go home and just get straight into reading scripts. And at times I would have to read a book overnight and then the next day be in a position to advise our senior management as to whether we should bid for that book. And that is stressful beyond belief. That just was not my wheelhouse at all. So I only lasted 2 and a bit years in that role because it just wasn't me. And what I didn't like, and one of the great things about getting a bit older is you figure out what you're good at and what you enjoy. And I figured out that I really did not enjoy that job. And I was very interested in technology and so forth. So I'm more interested in getting into technology. But that pure studio executive life, it seemed glamorous from the outside, but it was very rough on the inside. And there's no rules in that area. And the great part about being a lawyer, there's some pretty simple rules, which is if you're reasonably smart and you work hard and you're good with clients and really focused on helping them, then you can get ahead. And that's regardless, actually, I think, of where you're at right at the moment. If you can combine those 3 things, then you can achieve something pretty significant in the law. And that's not true of other walks of life. So if you're sitting as an executive somewhere in a big organization and you get laid off, it can be hard to replicate that job because your skill set is a little bit more amorphous. Whereas as a lawyer, you've got a very clearly defined skill set. Yes, you might get laid off as an in-house counsel at one particular organization, but if you want to work hard, you'll find another job and you'll find an area to succeed.
With that crossover of experiences you have, did you ever consider being like a media or entertainment lawyer?
Yeah. Yeah, everyone, well, not everyone, but lots of people have asked me that over the years. And also, I've spent a lot of time spending time with people who are interested in a career in media and entertainment. So the big problem with that is that you need to be careful about why it is that you are interested in that area of law, because it's very different loving film or loving music and then actually doing the legal work associated with it. And it's almost like the peril of your passion becomes your job. And the legal work in that space is actually very hard, is very IP heavy, and the layers of IP analysis are quite significant. And what we have in Australia is that we don't have a big entertainment industry. We don't have a big media industry. And so consequently, there's not a lot of money to be made. Just speaking frankly, it's very difficult to build a media and entertainment practice, particularly at a larger firm. You can do it as a smaller firm, and that's generally media and entertainment law is characterized by smaller firms or solo practitioners who are unbelievably good at that. But it just wasn't an area that worked for me. So I'm always just conscious when people ask me about that. And over the years, I've done a good amount of media and entertainment work, but it's not an area that I specifically target, and nor did I target it early on, just because it's a very specific skill set and can be quite difficult to forge a long-term career in that space.
Yeah, that's really interesting about what you said, not making your passion like your full-time job, because a lot of the time we hear that you should make your job something you love doing every day, but it is important to consider that side of it too, because otherwise you might lose the passion for your passion.
Yeah. Oh, look, I'm a huge, that's a whole tangent for me, Sophie, because I'm not a believer in, people say, find your passion, you never work a day in your life. And I am an example of someone who chased that philosophy. I got to film school, I got to Warner Brothers, and I was miserable, frankly. So what is wrong about it? And I'm not denying that if you are an actor or a musician or playwright and you love what you do and you do it every day and you can make a living out of it and it's all terrific, then that's fantastic. That feels like that's amazing. But for most people, I don't think most people go, I really want to be a property lawyer, or I really want to be an accountant, or that's not the way the passion or the dream proposition works. And so I think we set people up poorly by saying, you just find your passion and then you'll be able to succeed. I'm a big believer in the idea that you can manufacture a passion. And so for me with the law, as I said, I didn't grow up going, my gosh, I would just dying to redraft agreements. But I found a competency with that. So I found mastery. And so so Daniel Pink is a very fine sort of business theorist. So he wrote a very good book called Drive. And in that, he talks about the key thing about how you can enjoy your career and what drives you to have or to feel like you are fulfilled in your career is to A, have mastery, to B, have autonomy, and C, have purpose. And so I'm a huge believer that let's just put all those folks who grew up wanting to be a vet and then became a vet and love being a vet, then that's terrific. So that's making a passion. But if you're doing something which is a bit less inspiring, all is not lost. I think what becomes really evident, and through the research that I've done with Bond University, and I've spoken out of more than 200 lawyers, I think what happens is if you can develop your mastery, and then if you get a bit of autonomy, that's nice because no one likes to be told what to do all the time. And if you've got the mastery, you know how to do it. So you should be able to get the autonomy. And then you find the purpose in what you do. Then turning up every day is a joy. And I've been lucky to have a career in the law like that. I've been back in the law now 22 years and I still get a kick out of it. And if I look at it, it's lucky because I sort of vaguely know what I'm doing, I guess, by this time. And I do get a bit of autonomy, so that's nice. And then the purpose, and purpose has a variety of aspects. So there's a purpose in just making money to survive, to help your family survive. I mean, it's a great motivator to get you out of bed. Money's not the ultimate game. There's a certain financial requirement. And then in terms of with the actual work, the purpose for me is recognizing that what we do as lawyers helps people. And I know that's not what the media likes to portray. There's a sort of trope around lawyers of money grabbing and not very helpful people, but actually the lawyers who I've worked with, I think are really fixated on helping people and using their skills, their knowledge to help people. And we are so lucky because if you're not a lawyer, what we do is actually quite foreign for people and they are scared of the outcomes and worried, and you can actually make life much better for them. So it's a bit of a tangent, as you can tell, but I think it's a huge misnomer to say you just go and chase your passion. I think you can manufacture passion and actually have a really fulfilling career.
not really a tangent because what I actually wanted to talk about next relates to that.
Perfect.
Because I read one of your LinkedIn posts that you shared about a challenging period in your career. So you were moving from being COO of a listed internet company during the dot-com boom and crash, and in attempting to risk-proof your career, you returned to Australia, joining Anderson Legal as a partner, and then 9 months later, the Enron scandal led to the collapse of Anderson, leaving you to figure out your next step. Did you think that this changed the way that you evaluate career opportunities and potential risks going forward? So it was very related to what you were saying
Yeah.
in a
Oh,
way.
yeah. Oh, I mean, that was a critical moment in my life. So, yeah, so we just had a young family. So I'm in Los Angeles, and I'd gone from Warner Brothers to running this internet company, and we listed it. So it was looking like never work again time. So that was all very exciting. And then we had our first son, and then the crash happened, the dot-com crash. So I was then assessing what I was going to do with my career. And yeah, I did. I literally thought, I'll just risk proof it. I'll just go back to the law because that's what I know. And it's a profession. So that'll all be good. And yeah, so I joined Anderson Legal, part of Arthur Anderson. And 9 months later, Anderson collapsed. And there's a lot of stress. Well, I guess there's stress for all of us at every stage of our career. Young family, back and coming back into the law. So that was a difficult time. I was very lucky that I found a fellow by the name of Don Boyd, who was the managing partner of a firm called Deakins at that stage. And so he took a chance on me, and that's a key theme that comes up in my career and in most careers of people who I've talked to, particularly those who are what I call thrivers in the law, so people who are doing well. It's those relationships that just there's literally, I think, a handful of people who make your career. It's very difficult to identify them from the outset. But yeah, in terms of to get back to your question, which is, did that change me? You can't risk-proof your career. I found that out. And I also got to learn the meaning of joint and several liability within a partnership. So that's an exciting thing. But yeah, it did give me, and maybe that's why I've enjoyed being back in the law so much, because I've seen what it can be like, and it can be pretty awful. So for me, it's been an easy one to be back in the law and continue on. But yeah, I think we all have those experiences in our careers. Some of them more so, others less so. But just learning from those and critically recognizing the partnerships, because it's actually the partnerships and relationships that are forged during those incredibly difficult times in your life. They become very important, and always going back. And actually the reason that I put that LinkedIn post was I'd gone to see Don Boyd, the fellow who helped me out, because he's getting on a bit now. He's retired. And I just went to see him, say thank you. And that was just lovely. It's really important to recognize those people who've helped you along the way.
Very wholesome. And when you're thinking about your career, you've tried different things along the way, from Hollywood to Japan to Australia. Looking back, is there anything or something that you wish you had taken the chance on trying but didn't, that could have really led you down a different path?
So what happened to me was really quite profound in terms of, with the birth of our first, I had a big change that occurred to me internally. I mentioned before the whole idea of, I just went to film school in LA because I thought it was an adventure. I was like, what do I care? I'll just go and have a go over there. And then once Oscar came along, our first son, I was like, okay, this is real. Like I gotta look after. And I turned into my father overnight, weirdly. And so yeah, just decided that coincided with coming back to Australia. And so I was like, well, I've had this incredible frolic and it's been super fun. But actually what I want to do now is to raise a family in Sydney. And that was a super driver within me. So I don't look back on anything and think, gee, I should have done that, or I should have done that, because you obviously can't break the fabric of the universe like that. Because to do one thing may have meant other things didn't occur in a particular way. So I feel like I've been tremendously lucky with that. So no, I don't have any. I've been, very lucky with the firm. So Deakins, the firm that I joined 22 years ago, is now, we merged with Norton Rose Fulbright. So I've been very lucky to be in that firm. It's been a great firm, very kind to me, and recognizing that I'm somewhat different to the normal proposition. Have had wonderful experiences over the years.
And so tell me about your role at Norton Rose Fulbright now.
Yeah. So I'm a partner in the technology group. So I lead the technology practice here in Australia, and that's a great practice. We've got 7 partners and about 30 lawyers. So that's great fun. And it's exciting because technology is always changing. And I do like the shiny new thing, I have to say. So I was a big fan of Web3 and crypto. And so I've been down the rabbit hole on that with many clients and so forth. And the last couple of years, AI has been a really important part of my practice. And then in terms of global roles, so I was very lucky to have for 4 years, I was our global head of technology and innovation. And so that was a fantastic role because I am deeply interested in how we can use technology to change the experience of law for both lawyers and for our clients. So that was great. We did some fun things during that. My proudest moment with that was, and I'll speak like a father with this, but I co-created with a colleague the world's first AI-enabled privacy chatbot. And so we did it. It was about 4 years ago, and that was quite a thing back then. But we did it on a chatbot as a service platform. And I'm not technical, as in I can't code, nor could my colleague, but we just figured out how to do it using templates and so forth. So it took about 30 hours to build Parker, the chatbot. And on day one of Parker being live, it answered over 1,000 people's questions. It delivered over 40 hours of legal information. It was smarter at the end of the day than it was at the beginning of the day. And all up in license fees to the chatbot as a service provider, we paid $8.50. And we didn't have to use technologists. We did it all ourselves. And other than just getting the tech team to put the widget into the website to make it available. And so as a result of that, I then did a webinar to explain to the rest of our firm how to build such a chatbot. So we ended up having 6 Parkers around the world answering questions. And that's where I got the AI bug. I was like, this is because previous to that, my experience with legal technology had been that it was not really moving the needle. It was okay in small, narrow use cases. But that experience really made me think this is something else. And then obviously AI has developed a lot with generative AI since that time.
And so was that chatbot for consumers of legal services that came to the website?
Yeah. So, and once again, just full praise to my colleagues here at Norton Rose Fulbright, because when the slightly unusual tech partner claims that he's created a chatbot that we should make live and allow to answer questions, that's not a thing that a risk-averse law firm necessarily wants to do. That's full credit. The firm supported it and it worked out very well. So it was quite a bold thing, I think, for the firm to do back then.
And outside of your role at Norton Rose Fulbright, you're also the co-founder of LawPath that now has over 70 staff and 500,000 customers. Can you tell me about your role in the business and what LawPath does?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so about 10 years ago, I still had some unfinished business with the internet after the .com that exploded. And so with the approval of the firm, very kindly, they let me take a month off. And on my own account, I started a business called LawPath. And I was originally going to call it Law Gnome. That was the only other law-related name I could find on day one. And thankfully, I didn't call it Law Gnome, so we called it LawPath. And so that business has been going for 10 years now. And and in terms of, so I was involved for that first month, and then I'm still a line partner at Norton Rose. So I brought in 2 co-founders who have been phenomenal. So Don Woolrich and Tom Willis. So they've run the business. They are the reason why the business is what it is today. And it's quite something, I have to say. It's, as you mentioned, it's provided some form of legal support to more than 500,000 businesses. So, and what it does, maybe to put in context what it does now, I'll say what it was doing 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, the business was going terribly. It looked like we were going to have to close it. And because we had this proposition, which was, it was a subscription service for legal documents. So you get access to 500 legal documents, and no one was interested in it. It was a complete DIY solution. And so the thesis that we had was, well, you put in, if you need an employment agreement and it's 11 p.m. and you're a small business operator, then why wouldn't you just want to grab this employment agreement and fill it out? Anyway, it just shows there was zero interest in that. And then we, as a last-ditch attempt to save the business, we added, not only you get the 500 documents, yet you get unlimited calls with lawyers. And the business just took off from there. And so what it shows is, I think, a really important lesson for all lawyers, which is there's lots of talk out there about AI is going to take lawyers' jobs and all that sort of stuff. The big investment banks said that AI can do 44% of what lawyers do and so forth. And I just know from that LawPath experience that people don't want to DIY law. It's just too risky. It's too hard. It's a maze. It's a foreign language. And so what we can do is we can use the technology to make us great at the services that we provide to our clients, but it's not going to take away our jobs. We're just going to level up. It'd be a great tool that we can use. So as I said, we've got a subscription offering that we also have an incorporation engine. So it incorporates around 6% of Australia's businesses now. And that's a great channel into subscriptions. And then we also have a marketplace. So if you want to find a lawyer to do something, you just tap into the marketplace, what you need, and then LawPath will find you 3 lawyers and get 3 fixed price quotes. So that's that. In terms of my involvement, it's very limited. These days, I'm just a co-founder, and it's really my colleagues, Dom and Tom, who do the work. So I'm busy with the day job.
And so all of the experiences you've had have obviously built you up with a wealth of knowledge and experience. And about 3 years ago, you became an adjunct professor at Bond University, where you're focusing on helping lawyers succeed in their careers. How did that opportunity come about?
Yeah, so I'm intensely fascinated by how so many lawyers don't like their jobs. And it's a lot. And I put that into counterpoint with how I've managed to figure out a way to enjoy my career. And so I went to Bond with this proposition of doing some research into this. And so have ended up now interviewing more than 200 lawyers. And what I see through the research is it just couldn't be more stark. I interview these global general counsels, global partners in big firms and so forth. They love the practice of law. The way they talk about it is just incredible. Like, they love coming to work every day. It's fantastic. And so they're what I call the thrivers. And then there are the others, and I would say this is the majority of lawyers who I've spoken to and worked with in a coaching capacity through Bond. And they aren't enjoying the practice of law. And they're what I call the grinders. And so I don't think they've gotten to the Daniel Pink stage, or I don't think they've got, most of them, the older ones who've been around for a while, probably have mastery, but they don't have autonomy, or they don't have purpose. They can't see the reason. And you can see that if you're doing the same job, the same contract day in, day out, it's going to be very difficult to see the purpose in that. So I'm fascinated with that distinction between the thrivers and the grinders.
And so what courses do you have there that kind of focuses on those things you've just mentioned?
Yeah. Well, the most popular course, which has been crazy popular, is called Gen AI Productivity Training for Lawyers. There are some lawyers who are way down the rabbit hole on AI, but most lawyers are very uncertain about it. And the problem with AI and the law is you can read 3 different articles and you'll get 3 different viewpoints as to whether you should be using it or not, or whether it's safe or not safe. And so what we set out to do with Bond is this short course. First of all, it establishes why you should even care, and you should really care. All lawyers should really care. And then going through the ethical aspects of it, how you can use it safely, and then getting into prompting. So it's really about taking people from uncertainty around AI to knowing how they could use it in their practices immediately. And we then talk about the products that you can get, because there's now a lot. So I go through, there's a framework in there for thinking about which legal AI product should be for you. And we've then got interviews and case studies with more than 20 legal AI vendors. And then we've also got around 10 interviews with super users. And that's everyone from the General Counsel of National Australia Bank to solo practitioners. And then there's also a live session that we do online where you can learn from your peers. So the follow-on to the Gen AI course is called Legal Innovation Bootcamp. It will take you from idea through to how to sell that idea internally. And one of my favorite, all of these courses have lots of case study interviews that I've done with fascinating people around the world. And one of my favorite, and it's the most popular video across all the courses, is with a fellow by the name of Rawson Thurber, he's an old mate of mine from film school, but he's a superstar writer-director. So he wrote and directed Dodgeball and We're the Millers and Red Notice, just shooting a big film actually on the Gold Coast now. But these are $200 million films in terms of Red Notice. And so he understands how to pitch, because lawyers are terrible at pitching ideas, but we focus too much on the facts. We're not very good at selling. And so Rawson takes people through how to pitch, and he focuses on this idea of this Italian concept of sprezzatura, which is this idea of studied nonchalance, which is when you're pitching an idea, whether it's an idea for you want to roll out AI in your organization or in your legal practice, or whether you're pitching to a client, this idea of studied nonchalance, which is you've done that pitch so many times, you've rehearsed so many times, it looks like you're making it up on the spot. So lots of great stuff in that, and particularly great follow-on from the Gen AI course. And then the final course for lawyers it's called Lawyers Career Coaching Intensive. There's 50 interviews with global general counsels of Apple, Oracle, Verizon, PayPal, Zurich Insurance, Mars Wrigley, New York Securities Exchange. I've even got a whole bunch of other people, former New York governor, George Pataki, who's also a lawyer, Mike Cannon-Brookes, the billionaire founder of Atlassian. So everyone's talking about what makes great lawyers. So you get a good background in what makes great lawyers. And then I try to distill it down into coming up with a life plan, a career plan, and then your unique legal brand, which I touched on earlier. And then we've got what I call the 10 disciplines of thriving lawyers.
Can you cover, say, a couple from, I know these are broken into 5 personal disciplines and 5 professional disciplines. Are there a few of those that you could touch on and give some insights to?
Yeah, sure. And as you mentioned, so it's split into, there's 5 personal disciplines. So what can you do individually within yourself? And then there's the professional disciplines, which is how could you be better at the professional services that you provide. So just looking at the personal disciplines, the most important one, no doubt, is insight, is understanding what it is that you want out of high level, your life, and then getting granular, your career. And many lawyers have not spent any time doing this. As I said, there's more than 50 people, global general counsel, billionaires and so forth, who there's case studies on. So this is not just the world according to Nick. I've just interviewed that many people and I've refined it to these 10. But insight is definitely the most important one. And Mike Cannon-Brookes, so billionaire, founder of Atlassian, and in his case study, it's just fantastic. In the interview, he just says, look, there's a lot of people who don't have a plan. And if you don't have a plan, then you're just executing someone else's plan. So you need a plan. And it's the simplest advice ever, but many of us don't follow it. And I was lucky when I had the issue with the Anderson legal debacle and things were looking a bit ordinary. I did go to a coach, and the coach was unbelievably helpful. And part of the course, and particularly around establishing that life plan, that career plan, that unique legal brand, really came from that. So insight is critical. And then I think the other one that really sets lawyers apart is focusing on your relationships. And lawyers are not super great at building and maintaining relationships, but there is no doubt that having good relationships and building quality relationships, even with people who can be difficult, is really important. And there's a wonderful case study, once again, in the coaching course with Dan Cooperman. And Dan is a terrific human being. He was the global general counsel of Oracle, and then he became global general counsel of Apple for about 15 years, all through the Steve Jobs years and so forth. And he talks about the importance of his relationship with Steve Jobs and how you can make a relationship like that work. So I think really focusing in on your relationships. And then I think a lot of people have an unusual, or it's a bigger idea around relationships. It's like, I'm going to put stuff on LinkedIn and that will build my relationships. But actually, what has been shown from the thrivers is that they focus on a small number of key relationships. So 20, 30, no more than 30. And literally what they do is, and this is a great thing for anyone to do. In fact, you don't need to be a lawyer. You can do this in any walk of life. This is a really powerful career tool. You just identify, let's just call it 20 key people in your career realm who could help you. Just identify those. And they might be clients, they might be former bosses and so forth, is a great area. And you just keep in touch with them once a month and you keep an eye on that. Like you tally it up and you make sure. And that's not having a coffee because people don't have time for coffee these days. It's sending them something, sending them an email with an article that says, this is relevant, I think, to you, just shooting it through. You touch each of those relationships once a month. You will be amazed how you can grow your career. So that's on they're the two I talk about on the personal disciplines. And then on the professional disciplines, I think lawyers, one thing that comes up, particularly when the interviews that I've done with the non-lawyers, so the billionaires or whoever, or the people who use lawyers, so the business people, what they say is everyone just assumes lawyers are smart and know what they're talking about. And so very rarely do people say, because I'd be like, so what distinguishes a good lawyer from a bad lawyer? Very rarely was it this person was a super genius and they saved me, $4 million in tax. That doesn't come out. Literally, the differentiator is around communication. And lawyers are not necessarily great at it. And that's becoming harder because what's happened now, and there's some wonderful research around how particularly younger generations, so 40 and under, how they like to communicate, which is very different to how, say, the 40 and over like to communicate. So if you want to terrify a younger person, ask them to answer a ringing phone. That's not something anyone wants to do. That's not the way they do it. And indeed, the research shows that if you call someone under 40 unannounced, then without having sent a text or something beforehand, then their immediate feeling is that you think they have nothing better to do than to take a call from you at that time. Now, for someone over 40, that is bizarre. Like they just think, well, that's not true. I'm calling because I want to talk to you about X, Y, and Z. So what we've got with communication is there's a core tenet of communication which we can all learn from, which is most important gift that you can give anyone is the gift of your undivided attention. So that's critical. And lawyers are terrible at that. Lawyers love to, as the other side is talking about their response to a particular proposition, then lawyers are immediately, all they're thinking about is how they're going to respond rather than listening to people. And then some lawyers interrupt people as well. It's a nightmare for communication. So focusing A, on really listening, and then B, on communicating with people in the style that they want to be communicated with, because people over the age of 40 are like, well, we should all get together and have a coffee. And that's not the way it necessarily works for everyone. So communication is really important, and thinking about how the people you want to communicate with, how they would like. It's not about you. It's about how they would appreciate the communication.
To finish off the episode, I have some quick fire questions.
Yeah, great.
Where you can just reply with the first thing that comes to your mind, a sentence or
let's
a
go.
word. First of all, if you could relive one moment in your career, what would it be?
It was, if I could relive it in a positive way, I guess, that means it was, I guess, the day I got accepted into USC film school. It was a pretty landmark moment in my life.
Nice. And if you could have dinner with anybody who's dead or alive, who would you have dinner with?
This is, so this will be a bit, Groucho Marx would be, because I loved all of the Marx, this is a long time ago, but Marx Brothers were a comedy group, and I grew up loving those movies. So, Groucho Marx.
I love it. That's the quick fire questions I had. Thank you so much for sharing your career journey and tips along the way. If people would like to get in contact with you or learn more about the courses you are running at Bond, how can they do that?
Yeah, thank you. Well, you can just connect with me on LinkedIn and Nick Abrahams, and just send me a note and I can give you information. I mean, the more the merrier on that. And then alternatively, you can just Google Bond Breakthrough Lawyer and then Gen AI, and it'll pop those courses up for you there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nick.
Great. Thanks, Sophie. Been lovely talking to you.